If you are a fan of the channel, you know that Tom King and I don't exactly see eye to eye when it comes to storytelling. I personally believe a vast majority of the time he gets in his own way. But if you've also been watching my channel, you will know that a vast majority of the time on a #1 issue, Tom King almost always delivers a very intriguing story, a very good hook that makes you think, I want to read this story and find out what's happening. Rorschach and Strange Adventures are two recent Tom King stories that I will certainly recommending after the very first issue, with a warning, which you're going to get here as well. Tom King knocks it out of the park with first issue, and that absolutely happens this week with Batman Killing Time. This is a true blue Batman comic. It's got mystery, it's got detectives, it's got Batman's rogues gallery. This is actually a pretty intriguing heist story, and I'm kind of excited because Tom King has said before this comic book came out that he was going to stop focusing so much on Trauma and start focusing more on kind of action-based storytelling, which certainly fits a character like Batman very well. We have David Marquez on art here. The art is stupendous. I'm going to run you through the plot. I'm not going to give all the spoilers away, or I'm going to try not to spoil very much at all. Just kind of give you an overview of what's happening. I'm going to talk about some character moments that I thought were well executed. There are a couple of things in here that annoy me, but we'll see how it plays out. But if you're looking for a Batman comic that's actually Batman, like, I don't think this is executed quite as well as Batman the Imposter from Mattson Tomlin and Andrea Sorrentino, but that's not really a Batman comic. That is a completely different take on Batman. If you're looking for a real good take on the actual character, this is a phenomenal issue. It's like a 4.5 star comic book. The art's great. The storytelling is really tight. You follow it along, even though it is time jumping a little bit. So let's get right to it. Let's start with the art. David Marquez's art is absolutely beautiful. You can see this splash page where you have the bat signal. You got Batman cloaked in darkness, wonderful use of shadows. David Marquez is a big fan of Batman's cape. So anytime you see Batman in action, or even if he's not in action, you're going to see that cape doing something very wild, taking advantage of some of the wonderful visual elements that you can use with Batman. This is a wonderfully constructed visual masterpiece by David Marquez. The visuals are dynamic. All the characters have tons of emotion on their faces. This is a wonderfully illustrated comic book. Now let's get into the story. This is a heist story, and it's really well crafted. And like I said, essentially this is taking place at 3 different locations at 3 different times. One of them is a distraction for Batman, and then the other 2 are the big heist that's really going on while Batman is distracted with Killer Croc. Waylon Jones has been sent in essentially as the patsy to attempt a bank robbery, bring Batman onto the scene so Riddler and Catwoman can actually do another heist of something much more valuable that actually starts like an hour or 2 before this event here, but then also starts coinciding at the same time. That sounds confusing, but the way Tom King does it with the timestamps, and it's not really jarring as you're going back and forth, it's actually really easy to keep up with. And I'll tell you right here, I loved it the moment when I was a little ways into it and I finally figured out they're distracting Batman. The real heist is obviously going over here, and they're using Killer Croc as a sacrificial lamb to kind of go and fight Batman while they're doing the real heist. It is very well done. Definitely kudos not only to Tom King, but the editorial staff that's a part of this. As far as I can tell by the credits, the only editor on this book is Batman group editor Ben Abernathy himself. And this is wonderfully done. Like I said, it's a really tight, connected storytelling executed at an extremely high level. One of the things that makes it so successful is that it really highlights just how clever, conniving, and just how diabolical Riddler, Catwoman, and Penguin are to actually go and pull this off. It does not make Batman look stupid. Batman is doing what Batman has to do. He's called out of the shadows. He goes in there to go to save the first bank, and nobody knows what else is going on because it's been executed to perfection. At least their plan has been. It doesn't sacrifice Batman and his abilities for them to actually be able to pull this off. They brought him out in the open. It was part of the plan, so he could not interfere with what they're actually doing while they're pulling off the heist at a couple other locations. This is really good. This is the kind of storytelling that elevates every character. A lot of times lately, we're seeing a lot of stories that define down all the characters, including the hero and the villain. This defines everybody up because Batman's out there being a hero, and these villains are so smart, they're kind of using Batman's mission against him so they can go pull off an even more elaborate, smart scheme with apparently something even more valuable. I think this was really well done. It really highlights the effectiveness of Penguin, Riddler, Catwoman as villains, especially Riddler. He's one that's really highlighted here, in my opinion, in this story. Obviously, we'll see where it goes in the future. At the end, we do get to see this wonderful meeting between Gordon, who they do say is the newly appointed police commissioner in Gotham. So it kind of puts a time stamp on when the story is taking place. I do appreciate that little tidbit. Gives you a frame of reference when the story happens. Gordon explains to Batman that we've been fooled, we've been bamboozled. There was another heist going on in another location, and we can't get any information. It's at this specific bank. They went into the vaults. They won't even tell us what got stolen. And Batman says, was it Vault 5? Which, in fact, it was, because there's something in Vault 5. Is it something to do with the Wayne family? Is it something to do with Batman's identity? Apparently, Bruce Wayne or Batman, obviously the same person, know exactly what was in that vault and what they stole. Gordon doesn't know. Nobody knows except the criminals and Batman. Nobody knows why they're doing it. And that's one of the real hooks to bring you back for this story. I thought this was really effective. And once again, just look at the illustrations. This isn't a splash page, but this is quintessential Batman visual storytelling. This looks like a beautiful Batman comic, and it reads the same way. We do get what feels like it could be a Tom King-ism, where he shows this play from ancient Greek, and they're kind of going through some history and explaining what happens here. This could be one of those Tom King tropes that he throws in there that's supposed to accentuate or highlight the actual story that's going on. It's like a parable that adds more breadth to people that are aware of what they're talking about in these panels. Or what could be more interesting is if what they stole out of Vault 5 is actually associated with these events in actual ancient Greece. But I will say this is only one page, so it wasn't nearly as annoying as it can be in a Tom King comic. In the past, he has thrown a lot of these things at you and filled up the comic book with essentially things that are worthless to the actual story being told. So I thought this was pretty interesting. This could go either way, in my opinion. As far as something that definitely did bother me about the storytelling, there are multiple moments where there's a character speaking to another character, but they never show the character that's actually talking. You can see in this panel, it kind of looks like the bank manager who's been kidnapped by Riddler is talking to Riddler, and he says, of course, it's unusual, Mr. Spellman. There are reports of a madman at First National. These are not normal times. He's not talking to Riddler there. He's actually talking to another bank manager named Alex Spellman. It's highlighted in some of the prose and narrative that's happening up top, but it looks like he's talking to Nigma, and he's not. He's talking to another character that's off panel. This happens a lot. I didn't find it altogether confusing, although I definitely think it could confuse some people during the storytelling. I just found this uber annoying. Like, why not just put the character in there? It literally looks like he's talking to Riddler, and he's not. I imagine this has to be by design because it's done like 4 or 5 times throughout the story, and it's kind of jarring in my opinion. There are a couple of interesting things going on here. I like that they did highlight Waylon and why he is willing to play Patsy in this. He needs money because his relationship with Vera Eglinton has been compromised because of his look. She doesn't want anything to do with him. Don't touch me. Get off of me. I can't do it. It's gross. So he wants to have some surgery, some skin grafts. I don't think that's going to do it. You're definitely not going to fix those teeth with a skin graft or those eyeballs, but he thinks that he can get some cosmetic surgery and perhaps go back to the way he looks, and maybe she'll love him again. And I think this provides a pretty good motivation for Waylon to take part in this, even if he is the patsy. I like this moment, and I imagine he's going to play a bigger part of the story later on. Maybe when he figures out that he's been duped and he wasn't in on the real heist all along. There's another wild card character in here. Her name is Nippy. She's a stripper at one of Penguin's gentlemen's clubs, the Iceberg Lounge. You can see she's on a pole, and she has gotten the attention of this man. His name is Julian Thon. He is of no consequence. He is actually the bank security guard, and they're using him to get Waylon in the bank so he could do the first heist. That's not really going to be part of the story moving forward, but she certainly is, because there's another event involving her that makes it seem like she's really important, but you don't really know who she is or why she's there. Like, is Penguin using her? Is Riddler using her? What the hell has she got to do with this besides recruiting and getting this security guard to do something stupid? Potentially very interesting stuff. There's no way that Nippy here isn't going to play a bigger part in the story moving forward. Like I said, I really enjoyed this comic book. This is comic book storytelling at a very high level. But in the past, I have normally liked a lot of Tom King's miniseries, the way that they start out. Normally they give him 9 to 12 issues to complete them. This one's only 6 issues, and I definitely think that works in his favor. He has a tendency to start using a lot of filler that really doesn't add to the story. I think constraining him down to 6 issues will help him get to the finish line in a more cohesively executed comic book story. So I think that's working on his side. Normally by issue 3 or 4 is when you get the first real character assassination in a Tom King comic. And then the second to last, or maybe the third to last issue, you get the really big character assassination moment. We shall see if that's going to happen. But I can tell you at this very moment, from one issue of Killing Time, this is a fantastic Batman comic book story. It's a real Batman detective story. We don't get these types of stories that often with Batman these days. And I do like that they're highlighting the rogues gallery. For the most part, they feel like they're in character. There's a couple of things that, I don't like Tom King's version of Penguin, to be completely honest, but that's neither here nor there. There's other writers within the DC Comics history that have certainly shown Penguin as someone that eats, fish and stuff like that. I think he's called Penguin because he wears a tuxedo. I guess we'll disagree on that one. But for one comic book issue, Tom King certainly shows you that he could be a very, very good, high-quality Batman comic book writer. You're not going to get anything this good in Batman Catwoman, in my opinion, but this is really solid. We'll see if he's able to execute, because he said, I'm getting back to basics. I'm going to get to telling good Batman stories and not so much on trauma. This is a good comic book, but it is Tom King. If you don't like Tom King's writing, there's a chance this is going to go off the rails. Who am I kidding? We've read enough Tom King comic books in the past to know this is more than likely to go off the rails in some directions that you're not going to like. But there's a hope, because this one is very good. I'm going to open up the vault today. We're going to go back about a year and a half with a friend of mine. His name is Corbin. He's a huge Batman fan. We talked about where Tom King ultimately went wrong with his first Batman run. This was before it was over and James Tynion had taken over. We talked about some of his bad writing tropes, kind of where the story went off the rails. If you haven't checked this out, this is definitely a trip in the Wayback Machine where Corbin and I kind of get into those details. If you've never heard me really talk about a lot of my major issues with Tom King, this is a great place to start.